Everyone to take your seats, please. The inaugural session has fittingly set the tone for this morning's conference. We will now begin with the panel discussions. In round one, we have the discussion on how to make Karnataka the leading state in the wind sector, policies, regulations, issues, and potential solutions. Inviting on stage our esteemed panelists, Ms. Monika Rathi, Country Head, Vena Energy. I understand she was here. Right. As she joins us, inviting also on stage Shri Vishal Pandya, Co-Founder and Director, REConnect Energy. Shri Vinod Bishnoi, Head Business Development, Suzlon Energy Limited. J Elamathi Raja, Associate Director, New Energies and Transition Finance, Grant Thornton Bharat. And Shri Mahesh Vipradas, Vice President WIPPA and Senior Vice President SEMCorp, who will moderate this panel. We are also waiting for Shri V. Balaji, who's on his way. He's the Executive Director, SRLDC, Grid India. Over to you, Mahesh.
Very good morning. After the morning session where we have discussed about the issues that are being faced, now we look at the future wind development in Karnataka. Just to give a perspective, Karnataka, as you know, is one of the largest wind potential in India, third after Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. But it also has a long history of wind project development along with Tamil Nadu and Gujarat. One of the oldest projects are also there in Karnataka. In terms of state policies also, Karnataka has been in the forefront in the past for wind project developments, be it for the sale to the DISCOM as well as the open access projects. That was because of the stable policies that Karnataka had in past. So up to last 5 years, there has been a very vibrant wind project development in Karnataka. And as you know, there are certain issues that we have discussed in the morning. But there is now refocus on wind and in Karnataka especially because of the FDRE or balancing kind of a requirement which is provided by wind very successfully. And there is huge potential in Karnataka, which makes it a very key state, not only for wind project development in Karnataka, but also the overall RE development in India by offering a very specific wind projects from Karnataka, which basically makes it economical even in FDRE projects or in load following projects. Because wind availability, unlike solar, which more or less tends to match with the power demand. So with this background, we will start today's discussion. And I'm very happy to have this esteemed panel, and I was just going through it. So we have all the 4 or 5 major components which are involved in wind project development available here for discussion, starting with policies and regulation, the way the cradle plays its role and then the OEM and the project developer who basically looks at land, geo projects, and one of the largest IPPs who has actually successfully completed project development in recent past. Then we also have a person who looks at grid integration of wind projects, the issues revolve around them, and Mr. Balaji who would join us shortly, looking at the grid part of it. So we have all the components which makes wind projects viable, successful, and operational in this panel. So with this, I would start with the basic requirement of policies for promotion of wind projects in the state of Karnataka. So I will come to Mr. Raja about what has been the experience of policies and development, what has worked in the past in Karnataka, and what are the future plans or the issues that the state is working or should be working on. Mr. Raja.
Right. Thanks, Mahesh. That's a good introductory points to discuss about. As far as Karnataka is concerned, this is one of the key renewable energy promoting state in India. Now, if you look at the evolution of the renewable energy, the state started with solar almost a decade back. Even prior to that, it's the first state to come with the solar policy. And the solar got increased, and wind by its nature, pushed by the very accommodative policy environment for open access project in the state, helped the state to promote wind energy while others were procuring for under the utility PPM market. So that is how it started. Now, currently, we have a policy which is Renewable Energy Policy 2022 to 2027 that is very accommodative when compared to the other states. When I say accommodative, what it means, this is the one state which is without having any bias promotes both ISTS project as well as INSTS, where you feel resistance with some of the states where here Karnataka is open for ISTS as well. Second, particular to the wind, if we look at currently we are about 7 gigawatt out of the 18 gigawatt of the total installed RE capacity, which is roughly about 40%. And RE penetration in the state is 60 plus if we include the hydro, and it is 50 plus in case if we exclude the hydro. That comes to in terms of energy term, 40% or energy is already RE. Whereas if you look at what is the KERC has set up the target for RE penetration by 2030, which is only a 47 or 43%. The state is nearly closer to that. This reflects the very conducive ecosystem which Karnataka is offering for the, the renewable energy ecosystem. Let me stop here. Maybe I will delve more deep going forward, what can be done for promoting wind energy, further in the state.
Good afternoon, and we welcome Mr. Balaji here on the panel. Now I would turn to Mr. Vinod Bishnoi, coming from an OEM and project developer on ground background, and also listening in the morning about the issues that are being faced on ground by projects. So what do you think on especially on the land and geo, and also maybe partly look at the possibility of manufacturing space in Karnataka? Thank you.
So good afternoon, Mahesh. These two issues which extensively we talked about yesterday, today also, and I think we'll continue to talk about as and when we have a opportunity to meet any of the government. But Karnataka, these are become more intensive because of because of their nature of revenue law, which AC has explained, and on top of that, the little simplification in the nodal agency rules, cradle which is required, it was not done since a very long time. Like Gujarat has reformed some of the nodal agency law, kind of provisional developer permission they will give by the time you do the land acquisition, because wind are very location specific. So that's the one part. So which industry is working. The land, as far as land is concerned, I think with this leasing model, it has eased a lot as compared to earlier, because we did a lot of project where there was outright sale. Even the pathway was on the sale and everything was sale, which is having its own complexity. So with this little rule, what I can have the information about that. If the NA from beginning, it can go up to the commissioning, that you can do the work simultaneously, the NA process can continue. This is the last discussion with the revenue department and energy department, that fully getting away with the NA is not possible, but if NA before commissioning, so the industry will get partial relief at least. So that project can continue happen. By 8-9 months, we'll do the development and all this. But the second issue is we are not cognizant. One is, which most of the OEMs are facing, is the logistic, which because of the larger blade size and all, so that some issues we are trying to solve through some technology of, very dedicated trailers, sophisticated kind of trailers which can move. And then on equipment manufacturing, Mahesh, just to inform that as a company we are putting one more rotor blade factory in Karnataka. The land acquisition is done. As usual, any process is going on, which is taking its own time, whether I am doing for wind or blade factory. So that process is going on. And by next financial year, we'll come up with those larger blades, which are, and again, the challenge is that since we are trying to identify few pockets of minimum, 1.5 gigawatt to 2 gigawatt, so that we can set up those factories where near to those sites. So these are the challenges which, as a OEM, we are thinking 2 to 3 years in advance to address some of those issues.
Thank you, Vinod. Now coming to the IPP perspective, Ms. Rathi, who has from Vena Energy, has completed successfully commissioning of a CTU connected project. So more from that background, I would ask that what are the experiences during this process of project development till commissioning, especially which are specific to Karnataka?
Thank you, Mahesh. So first of all, I think I would probably divide the whole concept into two aspects. The first one more focused on development, and the second one on execution. Now from Vena Energy, as Mahesh mentioned, I'm happy to announce that we successfully commissioned a 160 megawatt project. It was a hybrid project, wind and solar. So while we talked about a lot of problems, yes, indeed, there was some support from the ground, which enabled the successful commissioning of the project. Specifically as SRLDC, I would say, because there was a lot of interactions which was required in terms of meeting the CA requirements, meeting all the commissioning requirements before the project could be commissioned. Now, if I focus on the development aspect, I would say that Karnataka is one of these states which is enabling geos so that you can probably have a boundary which is available to you. In fact, it was a boundary earlier which has got moved to coordinates today. Snehal sir is here, so maybe I'll probably highlight a problem with this, which was also mentioned by Parag in the morning. In the boundary mechanism, people were scouting and maybe just for a 100 megawatt project, blocking lot of acres for that project, right? And that was a problem and that was a need because of which Credle decided to move away from boundary-based geos to coordinate-based geos. Having said that, when we select the coordinates and they're awarded to different developers, challenge is sometimes when you actually start procurement of those parcels on ground, it is not really happening that you will get the same coordinates. You may have to move around here and there. The second problem that is happening is there are certain developers who probably procure the geo first and then start acquisition of the land. Whereas there are certain developers who start the acquisition of the land before they get the geo. Now, both of these parties transparently do not know whether these coordinates were already awarded to somebody or not. There is definitely some information which is available on the Credle website in terms of the geos which are awarded. But then there is a very long list of geos which are already in process, which takes its own 2 to 3 months kind of a time period when it is announced, when it is forwarded to the minister. Now, this is creating problems on ground. We already are aware of 3 or 4 instances where cases were taken to the court, taken for arbitration. Eventually, there were settlements which were done outside. But the need of the hour is that we probably need to give a temporary boundary to the people who have already obtained geos so that there are no overlaps. Second, I think transparently any geos which are under process should also be mentioned on the website so that the other developers are aware of what the problem is. I would also suggest that in a similar line, specifically when we are talking about FDRE concept, which has a combination of maybe wind, solar projects, wind, solar storage, sometimes when the geos are applied upfront, and today we are applying separately for wind, separately for solar, I would say that the need is that for storage, maybe there should not be any requirement for geo. The final capacities versus the initial capacity varies. Could we actually have a process where we do not have to come back for enhancement as long as the total capacity of wind and solar together is met, the developer is given the flexibility, or maybe there is just a signature or an online process which quickly ratifies the entire problem, because I think from a development to an execution phase, this will essentially solve this problem. So that's on the development side of activities. On execution, I would say I think land is something that we all have spoken quite a bit about. I will not really talk about that, okay, there are difficulties on acquisition of the land. Yes, there are a lot of challenges that we highlighted in the morning, right from getting the family tree out on time, right from having guidance value from the DC as to what compensation has to be provided to the villagers. While as developers, I think we are committed to taking care of the society. There's a lot of CSR activities that are done on ground. In fact, one of the things that we did was animal husbandry near the Gadag area, because we realized that while there is a lot of focus on education, we probably do not take into account the last livelihood of the farmers, which is nothing but maybe farming and maybe taking care of their animals. Now, the problem arises that while there are guidance values which are mentioned from the DC, there would be certain rogue, maybe I would say either aggregators or influencers on those local areas who unnecessarily start creating issues. So you eventually do not really close all the transmission line compensation at the guidance values. It can go up to 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 8 times. I mean, if you will speak to different developers, you will hear a very different number from almost every other developer, depending on the urgency of the problem on ground. So if there could be some specific discussions that can be done with the DC, maybe once a month meeting that can be led by the ACS Energy or the Energy Department and the Revenue Department, where problems which are faced by the developers on ground is understood and actions taken more from a law enforcement perspective, I think that would be really helpful. The second thing that we could probably talk about is that Karnataka has been at the forefront of at least doing certain solar parks. Pavagada is a great example, right? We haven't seen so much happening on allocation of revenue land or government land to the wind developers. If there could be either policies around it or there could be clusters which could be identified, which could be then auctioned out to the developers, that would be helpful. If we could have maybe even bidding, which is done for specific wind parks. One successful example is Gujarat, where they have come about area in Khavda region and the Jamkhambaliya region. If we could do something similar in Karnataka, I think the progress from today's 7 gigawatt installation to the 20 gigawatt installation of wind that we are targeting for Karnataka would be a successful journey. We are okay with even distributed wind parks as long as those are where the land has already been kind of taken care of and the rest gets auctioned to the developers. Yeah. That's about it, Mahesh.
Yeah, thank you. Coming to the grid integration and scheduling and forecasting being a major issue nowadays. However, we also look at Karnataka, which has done it very, very successfully, unlike we are still struggling in the states like Maharashtra on the STU connected scheduling and forecasting issues. So, and Vishal, which has been involved in this since long. So your views on what has worked in Karnataka on this area of basically all the regulations related to grid integration, the grid code, DSM regulations, which is very positive in Karnataka.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. Karnataka, from policy perspective, if you see, there have been a lot of fuss in terms of how a policy can be a great enabler for renewables in general. We have seen the growth of hydro. Karnataka has a significant portion of small hydro projects, and a large capacity percentage of that is driven by the policy intervention where the wheeling banking encouraged supply of electricity to the commercial and industrial customer. And the wind and solar story is also not different. In terms of thought leadership, if you look at certain policy initiatives which Karnataka took and which has started becoming mainstream at a national level. For example, the REC regulations, when they were formed in 2010, Karnataka took a slightly different view, saying that we will give it only for APPC players, because if it's given to captive and open access, there are certain sort of windfall gains. And later on, CERC in its 4th amendment amended the policy which was in line with Karnataka. Coming to grid integration of renewable, backed by the Forum of Regulators guideline, Karnataka was the first state in the country to allow aggregation of multiple assets. So if you are predicting a power outcome from a wind or solar or a hybrid project for every 15-minute basis for that location, you are bound to have more errors. Karnataka was the first state where it allowed that you combine wind, solar, whatever is the capacity, allow a single pool and dispatch at an aggregate level. The overall efficiency of that system is the errors go down, the financial impact on the asset owner also goes down. And today, the asset owners pay close to zero value in terms of the grid integration cost compared to other states. And now if you look at a national trend, CERC recently, through its grid code, they started talking about aggregation, which was adopted first by Karnataka, followed by Andhra, later on Tamil Nadu, and now it has started becoming a mainstream. So the 15% error got reduced to 10. There is still no impact on the generator. And when it comes to promotion of future capacity now, I think some more thought leadership that the policymakers can look at. Karnataka is one of the rare states in India where in terms of energy mix, we are close to 35-40%. In terms of capacity side, the renewable is as high as conventional capacity in terms of install. And if you look at the energy vector throughout a year, there will be good number of days and weeks in a year where 60, 70, 80% of energy consumption would be met by renewables. Now, if you want more growth in RE, I think certain parameters we may have to look into. One is that how do we accelerate the demand growth? Because if the grid has a lot of RE, the integration will become a challenge, the backing down of assets will start becoming a mainstream like what we had seen in Tamil Nadu. So demand growth, if it is accelerated by way of promoting certain additional measures like promote EVs, we had, Karnataka unfortunately has a highest tax rate when it comes to road tax and the registration tax for passenger vehicles. EVs can skyrocket your demand growth by 25 to 30% at household level, right? And that's one intervention you can look at. And it closely relates with the GDP growth also. So while the promotion of renewable, Karnataka has done a lot of first, the future capacity growth is bound to be driven by how do we develop the industry and certain consumption pockets like EVs and all. And if some interventions are taken there, it will provide a long runway for capacity growth for not only renewable, but other forms of technologies like battery energy storage and so and so.
Yeah, thank you. Coming to the actual grid, which is the most important component for us, Mr. Balaji, we have seen the regulations in recent part, especially in the grid code, which are very specific about commissioning requirements or the DSM regulations and the GNA regulations, 3-4 regulations. So from a grid operator point of view, what are the things that you would like to mention that the wind project developer should keep in mind while they are looking at commissioning of the projects? Because there are very specific requirements in grid code under the DSM regulations. So your views on that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a very relevant question. Actually, it's not the new requirements. Right from the 2013, CEA has floated the grid connectivity standards for all the plants, which also include the renewable plants. In fact, most of the grouse from the industry, from the developers, is that RLDCs are enforcing, are being very strict in, or they have to be a bit benign or a bit relax in the enforcement. I would only appeal to all the players that, see, you have invested so much money. You have done the project in a very tight timelines. Now, unless the grid is safe, you are not safe. Your revenues are not guaranteed in the O&M phase. Even Monika was mentioning that ROW problems, compensation, other problems. It just don't end with the time, the compensation paid at the time of the acquisition of the ROW. Even during O&M also, we find that when a line is to be restored after a fault, the local people ask for, clamor for compensation. They don't allow the developer to, the operator, to start again take the line into service, that kind of problems. So what I mean to say is, There are, yeah, the industry has got certain expectations from the government. We also get a lot of pressure from the industry and even from MNRE and higher ups that you have to facilitate. Many things are getting bottled up. You have to facilitate. Yeah, we have to facilitate, but at the same time, there are events where loss of generation, renewable generation, to the extent of 7,000 megawatt has happened. And about over 5,000 megawatt of loss of generation happened more than 7-8 times. And almost daily, I can say almost daily, oscillations keep happening, especially in the northern part and Rajasthan side. And almost daily, I would say, loss of about 1,000 to 2,000 megawatt of RE generation keeps happening. All because of the non-compliance of the grid standards. See, certain things you are expected. See, grid is, you may get relaxations from government, from regulators, from every, but the law of physics, the grid is governed by the law of physics. So there they don't recognize your difficulties. They only go by law of physics. So there, these incidents, in fact, I was saying 7,000 megawatt loss. It was not factored in the design of the grid. Maximum 4,000 megawatt loss was envisaged, and the under frequency relays and the DF by DT relays, they are all designed for a contingency of only 4,000 megawatt. Whereas the large, again, during the panel discussion, it came out that concentration, you were saying you are okay with distributed generation. In fact, I feel a state like Telangana has gone for more of distributed solar, and it has faced less problems in the cloud cover and other things and congestion and other problems. So, in fact, placing all eggs in one basket, like Kavada, what we are going to do is our biggest worry and concern. 35 gigawatt to 40 gigawatt you are placing in one basket. One cloud, a big large cloud over a few kilometers will lose the entire 35 to 40, at least 20% of 40 gigawatt also is going to cause a big burden on the grid. So what I appeal to all the developers is that you at the time of, these are, Mahesh was mentioning the new, they are not new requirements, right from 2013, the CEA has come out with the grid connectivity standards for, which add the RE aspect, and 2019 Feb, they had added a few more requirements, just a few more like frequency response kind of things. So only thing is, all the RE was so far at the time was in the state grid. Perhaps the state, I would say, no doubt that states have not enforced that kind of grid standards. And most of the RE started coming in interstate transmission system under RLDCs only from the time of 2020, very modestly, and now in a large way. So now we being the grid managers, we are being directly responsible. In fact, CEA grid standards are applicable to all irrespective of state. It has got jurisdiction even in the state also. But enforcement at state level is lacking. They have to be required very much. And that's one thing. Secondly, the grid is to be strengthened not only within the state, but also the neighboring states. When Karnataka, in fact, you are saying how to make Karnataka the leading state. Already Karnataka is a leading state, I would say, with a CUF of over 20% and instantness of about 132% penetration, and in terms of megawatt up to 72% and in an average over the year about 25%. With these kind of figures, Karnataka is already a leading. And to sustain this, you have to strengthen the transmission system within the state, intra-state, and across the neighboring states. Whenever Karnataka, during monsoon time, it injects the western, in fact, I have recently joined southern region, I have been in western region. And western region, the Maharashtra system was getting congestion for the injection from the Karnataka. So transmission planning is to be done in a holistic manner. And curtailment is, no one wants curtailment. Even we don't want curtailment because it's very painful thing. And it is the time when you recover your revenues. We are very well aware of it. All I want to say is that we have to respect the law of physics, and it's in our own interest that, and one more thing, all the players, all these OEMs, they're all international OEMs. And all the developers like many like Alphanar and all these many other players, they are all international players. And they are complying with all the grid codes across the world. They are complying in toto. In fact, in a country like AMO, Australia, to get a grid clearance, it takes not less than 2 to 3 years. They celebrate when I get clearance from the AMO. And with that kind of compliance adherence there, why not here? We are a large grid, we have got our own perils, we have got our own weaknesses. It is in our own interest we follow the grid standards. I think I have spoken much. I leave it to you for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will come back to that. I was more looking at the commissioning process that has come in the recent regulations. But we'll come back to that. I will come back to that, sir. So now coming to, for Karnataka, I would look at the state procurement and open access are the two major areas of growth for wind projects in India. So I would request the panelists to talk about these two and specific suggestions for Karnataka, starting with Mr. Raja.
Right. For promoting wind in the state of Karnataka, we need to first strengthen the market what we are having. So we can classify the market broadly into three. One is the ISTS market, driven by the intermediaries. Two is the open access, which is well established in Karnataka, and there is a requirement from the C&I fraternity to accelerate that. Third thing is, we have to now get into a state level procurement of wind, similar to what has been done for the solar. Now, these are the three markets, and the wind will be driven by these three. If you look at one by one, the ISTS, without saying anything, and by its nature and advantage, as the state is accommodative, the market is picking up. If you look at, we are currently at 7 gigawatt as on today, and the state has a RE pipeline of about 25 gigawatt, which is to be commissioned in next 2 years. Out of 25 gigawatt, that 14 gigawatt is from the wind itself. The 14 gigawatt of GO has been already issued. Out of 14 gigawatt, 12 gigawatt is ISTS projects, and 2 gigawatt is INSTS. The two majorly coming from the open access. Now, so ISTS is almost in autopilot mode. Now, what we need to focus is the INSTS, which is the state procurement, and second is the open access. Now, what will be the driver for the state procurement? The central has asked the states to do the resource adequacy, and many states has taken the action, and Karnataka proactively come up with the policy. KRC come up with the regulations, and while regulation comes up, the state has already done the resource adequacy. Now, resource adequacy will drive the future procurement of wind, dedicated wind bids in Karnataka, which PCKL and CREDL will be driving that. And now that's take care of the INSTS market. The last one, which is the current driver of wind in Karnataka, is the open access, which is the critical. Now, if you look at, out of 18 gigawatt of RE capacity the state has, about 5 gigawatt is coming from open access. Out of 5, roughly about 2.5 is solar, and roughly about 2 is wind it's alone. Now, if we look, this is the business as usual scenario. Now, what is happening? The wind is only concentrated in few states. The heavy lifting to be done by the top 3 to 4 states, which is Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Karnataka, and maybe the Maharashtra and AP together. When the central made the transmission for evacuation, it was purely from the perspective of 500 gigawatt plant, what we had that time. But we had the green hydrogen marketed cheaply in the last 2 years. That is also requiring or demanding a significant quantum of wind, and that most of this wind is getting concentrated in Karnataka as on today. So now, from the perspective of grid, I'm slightly deviating from the open access, I'm coming back there. From the perspective of grid, the CTU is already, it's more frozen. We already know that the capacity is going to available from 2029 onwards. Now it's to the state to ramp up the STU capacity, STU level bids to be driven, STU capacities to be augmented, and there also a need of increased support from central is needed, so that whatever the prevailing 20 to 30% the CFA being given for green energy to the state, if they can increase it, the transaction cost will come down. That will reflect in the overall direct cost of electricity, both for discoms as well as open access. Now, coming to the open access market, now if you see, the state has evolved very, we earlier having the annual banking, So that gives a lot of flexibility to use the energy. That got squeezed to now 6 months, and now it became 1 month under the green energy open access. But what is the constraint? When it was even the 6 month, 1 quarter, the settlement can happen easily. In the other quarter, the wind we could not able to, meaning could not mean to them, they just stress on the ESCOM to arrange the power later the time when it is available. When it became wind, monthly banking under green energy open access, now even it become, the burden is shifted from ESCOMs to the C&I consumers. Now, as a result, what happened? One of the key driver of wind in the state is C&I consumer. Now, because of monthly banking, they are tightened to reduce their capacity because they could not able to handle the excess energy. Now, that's an issue. But despite that, a flexibility has been given in the green energy open access regulation by saying that if you can able to store the energy on the off-peak times, which is the afternoon and night, this is the time where predominantly wind generation happens, you can also use it during the peak, which is morning and evening, by paying additional charges. So that flexibility Karnataka has given. Now, what would be the impact of this with respect to the open access? So how it going to impact the wind energy addition means like this. Karnataka is one of the favorable state which have a extended wind availability. It is starting from April till October. It's almost 6 to 7 months. Compared to the other state, it's a slightly stretched availability of wind. This is where it supports the bid like RTC, FDREs, and hybrid. Now, when such kind of availability happens, availability exists, and when somebody wants to store the excess energy and use it in the peak time, that puts stress back on ESCOM to arrange that quantum at higher cost, maybe at peak price or little bit on the higher price. Now, to address this issue, the state has already taken a measure in its policy way back in 2 years back, 2021, where the policy says that even the existing PPA, existing project, being it PPA or open access, can integrate energy storage in the existing projects. Now, how it's going to help when energy storage ESS has been integrated, the flexibility is given to the C&I consumer to handle that excess energy, and it reduces the burden on the ESCOMs. And how it can be, the benefit can be shared, when ESCOMs have to give back the bank energy, their procurement cost will be higher, probably on the peak times. So if there is a revenue sharing mechanism or the commercial sharing mechanism happens, the C&I consumers can be allowed to integrate the ESS, and whatever the savings ESCOM is envisaging can be passed on in terms of reduced transaction cost in the open access, hence the delivery cost will reduce. So that way, it reduces stress on the grid as well as reduces commercial stress on the ESCOM. But obviously, the commercial mechanism of how the benefit of ESCOMs from procuring the peak high cost power transferred to the transmission cost to the transco to be worked out. So this way, it will increases the capacity planning by C&I consumer. Naturally, the wind capacity will increase. The capacity addition also increase. Another, while the policy is already there in place, what we need a clear direction in terms of guideline and the regulatory, how ESS can be integrated in the existing PPA. So that way, PPA market also will get promoted.
Thank you. I think adding storage to the existing consumers, C&I consumers, which are doing open access is an interesting idea. Coming to Mr. Bishnoi, apart from the state procurement and open access, I believe the forest clearances is also an issue, or at least used to be an issue in Karnataka. So your views on that?
Mahesh, I think with the bigger size of the project, most of the developer, including us, not looking towards forest first of all, because industry has shifted towards CTU, where average project size is 200 to 300 megawatt, and in forest nowadays, with the regulation become tighter and tighter. Though on the face of it, every time we say it's getting relaxed, but practically it is not. So with that, I think forest for wind, at least for few years, unless until somebody works for 5 years, then you lose whole advantage of a small gestation period, which is the beauty of the renewable. Then you are heading towards hydro, where I will develop the project, do the development work for 4 or 5 years, and do the construction for 2-3 years. So I don't think with this competitive and low tariff and all, that luxury is there. One part which Raja was telling, there is a gap. So sir is sitting here. C&I market was very attractive. Local C&I I am talking about, STU to the Karnataka-based industry was very good in Karnataka. It is almost dead now. So we did last project of some 24 megawatt for one of our client who's a big mining company here. And they were doing every year. And then for Hindustan Aeronautics and all. It is almost dead now. Why? Because there is a perception difference. The DISCOM and including KERC is thinking that the highly paid consumer are going away from DISCOM. So we talk less about it, but it's a wrong perception because now consumer is free. They can access power from anywhere. So you get, and this is one. And second, the whole issue is, can I use during peak hour where again, number of time it is talked about that DISCOM has to procure expensive energy during peak hours. So what few states have done, so that's the only one problem of DISCOM, that why I am not able to give banking, that wind generate during uncertain hour and the consumer is asking to get power back from the grid during peak hours. So what few states have done which kill this issue once for all, that during peak hour you can't draw. During those 4 hours, you can draw the energy whatever you are generating, but the banked energy you can't draw. With this simple, this thing, which is in a way, it's a kill the entire discussion which is happening from years. And Karnataka, Maharashtra, these are the few Tamil, very industrial rich state. And if we are saying that because of these faulty regulations, sorry to use that word, so that we will not allow the industry to use renewable. They can procure from CTU. You can't ban it, but they can't produce in state, inject into KPTCL grid and use them. It's a very, situation which should be avoided best. So that's one request from now, since the agency will look entirely for these regulations, like MP. The DISCOMs are not getting into all these things. The MP Power Management Company, who is the sole responsible for procuring power, so they know that if the power procurement during those 4 hours is very expensive for them, it's simple that we will not allow the banked energy to draw. So the industry will work around rest of the 20 hours, how to maximize the renewable. By just putting one word and killing the entire local C&I market should be must avoided. So that's the...
Thank you. Coming to Ms. Rathi, the CTU projects versus the STU or the state procurement, one of the biggest advantage of the projects done by the REIAs or SECI was a payment security kind of a thing, which gives a big comfort to the IPPs. But looking at Karnataka, which has a good track record of payments, Gujarat, Karnataka, few states which are very good track record in terms of payments. So on the state procurement, and we are hearing that they're looking at procurement through state around 2 gigawatts or so. So what would be the suggestions while they come out with probably the bids, etc.? Because I believe the grid strengthening might be required. But apart from that, your views on that?
So I think there was definitely a very big difference between the procurement from center versus state earlier because of the credit rating of the DISCOMs that were there in different states. I would say post LPS rules which have come into effect, the situation has improved quite a bit. I'm sure there are multiple developers in the room who remember those days where there was at least a backlog of almost 1 to 1.5 years of revenues which were not paid by the DISCOMs, which has kind of improved over the years. Karnataka specifically, even after the implementation of LPS rules, took into account about 48 installments in which the payments have started to flow in. Now, what's been happening is that because of this regulation of LPS and because the DISCOM's power is getting regulated when they start defaulting on the payments, slowly most of the DISCOMs have started honoring most of these payments, right? And this has enabled more and more states to come up with their own bids and own procurement. So if you see, I think Gujarat of late has been coming up with their own procurements. the amount of bids that we were getting from SECI has reduced, at least in the state of Gujarat. Karnataka in the past had come up with specific substation-specific bids. There were 2 which had happened in the Gadag-Koppal area, but unfortunately that couldn't get signed because of multiple reasons. They were specifically associated with the solar park side of things. I think Karnataka with whatever has happened in the past can come up with more and more state procurement. Definitely there are multiple developers who would be willing to participate in the state bids, be it solar, be it wind. And when you look at specific state procurements, there could be probably bids which could be substation specific. And maybe when you make it substation specific, then developers who have been developing in that area, maybe who have moved forward in terms of the land acquisitions or have done projects in the past, would get an additional advantage in terms of knowing what's required in that area and move forward. The biggest disadvantage that today, though we have, is this grid strengthening that is required on the STU level, because wherever there is wind potential, there is relatively lower grid which is available, because that has been already utilized in the past because of the high potential area. Second, specifically in the Bijapur, Davangere area, a lot of high potential sites have come under the radar of MOD. So if there could be some actions which can be taken specifically by the ministry in Karnataka, talking to the MOD in terms of clearing some of those zones, that will enable higher and higher penetration, I would say. And I think we were specifically looking at Bijapur, Bellary, Davangere area, where there are really high wind potential sites, but they have come under that radar. Hope that addresses the question.
Thank you. Coming to Vishal, coming back to this open access market from the infrastructure point of view, metering, scheduling, what would be the recommendations to basically kickstart again the open access market?
So in terms of unit economics and the energy procurement models, if you simply apply, the state will end up buying electricity which will be provided by and large to entire ecosystem. But of that now, the CNI has started moving away from the DISCOM, and this is a trend which is not specific to Karnataka but pan-India. Simple reason is the cleaner form of energy excites a lot of consumers, and it also comes at a cost advantage. Now, what that implies is that the state will end up doing a balancing job of feeding that electricity which is procured to the residential household. 94% of that in Karnataka are expected to get free electricity. So they have no incentive to move away and look at having their own rooftop solar system as a source of energy. And also the agri, which is again heavily subsidized segment. However, the need to have a stable economy, Karnataka remains one of the fastest growing economy, 10% plus GDP, and the demand growth is visible. So for that, there is still a headroom for growth in terms of public procurement of renewable and all forms of energy, including storage. On the CNI front, while there have been a lot of first and thought leadership, the recent order, if you see what has come up from the Honorable High Court, what was basically a dispute about honoring the sanctity of contract has become a jurisdictional, tug of war. We have seen a lot of first. The late payment related issues. Karnataka was the first state to implement LC-based PPAs. I remember when Shri Srinivas Murthy Saab was the chairman KERC. At that time, Karnataka was the first state to implement LC-backed PPAs. Right. Later on, multiple other policy initiatives, be it grid integration or promoting renewable, including peer-to-peer trading. How many states in India have a forward-looking policies where a consumer owning residential rooftop can start supplying electricity to the neighbor using Karnataka grid and the Karnataka DISCOM, right? The court order which has come up recently, squashing the entire regulation, it's an unfortunate development, right? What was done by various central agency as well as the state regulator, order like that completely undermines entire progress that is being done over a decade, right? So the consumer will find a way to move to a cleaner and cheaper source of energy because industries will look for their own profits. And likewise, the IPPs will also look at maximizing their ROI or having a better credit profile from an off-taker. And while the policy means are there, the strengthening of the ecosystem on the regulatory side and the stakeholder management. Now, there are new stakeholders evolving, questioning various policy initiatives that perhaps needs to be done more effectively in state like Karnataka.
Yeah, thank you. Coming to Mr. Balaji, the grid operator obviously will have a last word on these. Sir, I was referring to the requirements of the FTC and commissioning process, which is come into the new grid, which puts a lot of onus on the SRLDC to do lot of checking, testing, etc. So one around that, would SRLDCs would need to be strengthened further, because you will be having more and more capacities coming up for commissioning and fast commissioning, as you have mentioned. And second is your recommendations for the STU to looking at grid strengthening and other, especially in Karnataka. Thank you.
Yes, the pressure on RLDC is more as more new projects in RE and ISTS level are getting added. And we have strengthened our teams by diverting from other, in fact, we have got very limited executive manpower. And in fact, recruitment doesn't take overnight, and it should not be done all in one go. They should be phased properly. And we have trained all the new engineers in this aspect. And we have diverted the existing engineers also to learn more about the system studies and to ensure the grid compliances. In fact, whatever I would remark that you are all working round the clock irrespective of weekends, perhaps, I don't know, some of them. But the pressure is on us. The pressure is on us that, in fact, though it's a 5-day week, we work 24/7 even because your requirements like data integration are, you submit, there are multiple, in fact, I would say that right from the day your project, 1 year, 1.5 years before your project comes, the day of the light, see the day of the light, your people, rather the RE people, approach us, and then we tell them clearly, we hold multiple VCs and explain them, these are the requirements under CEA guidelines, and and we do a lot of clarifications, not only with them, but also with their associated OEMs, with their associated engineering teams and their foreign collaborators, all that. And we, in multiple rounds, we zero upon and we clarify to them through VCs, and we minute those things and we exchange the mails also that this was discussed, and in whatever the data you had submitted, these are the lacuna or shortcomings, you please rectify and resubmit. So in multiple iterations it's happening, and by the time your project is ready, we are finally come. But still, many occasions there were still some non-compliance in terms of installation of the harmonic filters or installation of the reactive compensation equipment or any other things, and submitting the mathematical models of the things. And their whatever is submitted, they are not matching with the regulations. And even after commissioning also, many of the developers, they give an undertaking that we will comply with them in the due course, please. So certain things we are bringing those things to the knowledge of CEA at the highest level, and then now CEA is giving those concessions of timelines. Within 6 months or within 3 months, we complete it and again submit them to that. So it is institutionalized now in one way, that it's not just at the whims and fancies of one RLDC or things like that. We are bringing full transparency is there in the entire process, and full familiarization or capacity building of the teams, because your outlook is different, the grid outlook is different. So we are trying to match it, and then we are doing our best. We also have a lot of pressure not to bottle up the power which you have commissioned with so much. Hearing the call of Honorable Prime Minister, you are doing a wonderful job. We are quite aware of it, and in the process we are also doing it, and together I am sure we can overcome all. As far as the second question of intrastate transmission strengthening, it is much needed. While all the loads are in the southern part of Karnataka, the most of the RE is in the northern part or central part, and the power to come all the way from there to the load center, transmission system is to be strengthened. And while the interstate transmission system, the CTU and the other ISTS licensees, they are doing in a very fast track manner, in a timely manner. There is, I think, there is some amount of speeding up is required and more strengthening is required. Even today also there is a CMETS meeting in which for strengthening the corridor in the Karnataka, certain projects were being given to the ISTS levels. And the one big thing I want to tell that not only just you have put the line, but also during the O&M you have to maintain the transmission system. Otherwise, any fault in the means associated nearby transmission system will interrupt your thing. Also, your power is interrupted is one thing, but the dips and other kind of loss of generation happens. The grid should be ready for that. We don't have much reserves. We don't have much hydro. We don't have much storage devices. We don't have much pumped storage plants. And we don't have AGC. And at the same time, our under frequency relays and DF by DT relays, their healthiness also are to be regularly monitored for a sustained integration of RE. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This has been a good session. At least I had enjoyed a lot on the views expressed by the panelists. So on behalf of WIPPA and myself, I would like to thank all the panelists for their time and their view. Now I hand it over to Deepa.
We are running a little late, so I'm sure there are questions. We'll wait until the second panel discussion and we'll take them all since the entire team will be here in any case. Mahesh sir, thank you. And have the team bring in the token of gratitude, please.